happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we are taping on the Trans Day of Remembrance.
Yes, we are.
But in the headline news, there were momentous political victories in Virginia and Kentucky, and a record number of out LGBT candidates were elected nationwide.
We're feeling slightly hopeful. I'm crossing several fingers. We'll discuss this at greater length. But of course, we're not hopeful because the Trump Department of Health and Human Services has greenlighted anti-LGBT discrimination by a lot of groups receiving federal funds.
And we're not hopeful because two right-wing Supreme Court justices met with anti-LGBT leaders and had their pictures taken.
Yes. Shameless. And meanwhile, we're very sad to report that a gay man who cited juror bias at his trial as a reason for him getting the death penalty has been executed.
And the Flamboyant TV astrologer Walter Mercado, who challenged notions of gender, has died in San Juan.
A pro hockey player comes out, but he's retired at a very young age. He's in Norway.
And just in time for the holidays, Kmart introduces families headed by same-sex couples into their popular doll line in Australia.
Now, it occurs to me, and we'll, I'm sure, elaborate, that you can get several sets of dolls with two men and two women, but if you want, you can just switch them around. It's not like you're forced to have
more on that story
couples.
later. It is. We are taping on the Trans Day of Remembrance.
Yes.
This is Trans Awareness Month. They opened up a trans memorial in Tribeca in Lower Manhattan. We have a picture of it. Pictured is RuPaul veteran Peppermint there. The sculpture is titled Dandara, named for Dandara dos Santos, a trans Brazilian woman who was beaten to death in 2017. The sculptor is Rubem.
Leave that picture up a second, please.
The sculptor is Rubem Robierb, who was married to ABC weatherman Sam Champion. It's a fiberglass butterfly wings. It's going to be up till May 2020 in Tribeca Park.
Now, the sculpture is the wings, and the idea is that you can go and stand between the wings, as Peppermint is doing there, and, have your own experience of the freedom of the butterfly wings, which is what this is meant to symbolize. But as Andy says, that'll be up there for about 6 months in Tribeca.
Right.
All right, and in other trans news, the mayor of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has signed a gender expression non-discrimination act, specifically targeted at youth organizations, which are mandated to protect transgender clients, and the Gender Expression and Identity and Expression Non-Discrimination Act in New York State went into effect November 1st.
Yes, they also were requiring accessible gender-neutral restrooms on every floor of City Hall. And I've seen a lot of these in New York, in public buildings now. Yeah, in Philadelphia,
Okay.
All right, should we talk about the elections?
Absolutely.
Okay, it was a great day in this off year. You saw that in Kentucky.
For the most part, not in Mississippi.
Well, I will say that in Mississippi, a 10-point loss isn't that great for a Democrat. But anyway, in Kentucky, Democrat Andy Beshear beat the incumbent anti-LGBT Representative Matt Bevin, and a right-wing group down there thought they'd test out their anti-transgender ads to see if they could knock Beshear off, and that did not have any effect.
The other big...
Democrats lost the Attorney General's race, which Andy Beshear had been.
And a lot of other races in Kentucky.
That was 58-42, but the new guy is African American, Daniel Cameron. He is opposed to abortion. And he's against gun control.
Well, the received wisdom about the Kentucky elections is that everybody hated Matt Bevin, and so his loss, even though Trump went to campaign for him, is not considered a loss hugely for the Republicans, but more personal.
Trump said it would be.
Yes, I know. And believe me, he's not going to take responsibility for this. The other big headline, of course, is in Virginia, where the Democrats took over the state legislature, both houses.
Yes, first time in 24 years.
Already have the governorship. Now,
and that's so important because now they get to pass all kinds of legislation, including LGBT rights and the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. They'll be the 38th state, although there's a lot of dispute whether that will count.
And in Virginia, trans state delegate Danica Rome was reelected with 59% of the vote, and 4 other LGBT candidates
we have
were
a picture of them. And if you want to see what all the LGBT election results are, you can go to victoryfund.org. They did very well. In fact, 80 candidates that were endorsed by the Victory Funds won, more than in any other odd-numbered election year ever, and there are currently 765 out LGBT elected officials from coast to coast.
Some of those elected last night, as we're taping, were the first LGBT women to the city councils of Boston and Indianapolis. And a trans woman was elected to office in Massachusetts, the first time that's happened.
We got a gay mayor in Jamestown, New York, Eddie
really? Home of Lucille Ball?
Sundquist. First time for that. Big news in Columbus, Indiana, where Mike Pence's hometown. I've been there. It's where they have all those modernist buildings. For the first time in 40 years, Democrats took control of the city council in Columbus, Indiana, and the Indianapolis City Council tripled LGBT representation.
6 trans people elected of the endorsed crowd by the Victory Fund. That's big news. But here's what I think is important and how a lot of this happened. Turnout. It's all about turnout. It's about suburban women. It's about Democrats turning out. And my visceral feeling has been, starting with the midterms last year in 2018, is that there is a groundswell, a tidal wave of people sitting at home right now or out in their communities doing things who are just so ready to go out and vote Trump and these Republicans out of office next year. And every time they get a chance now, they're getting out there and doing it. And they're ready to do it next year.
That's basically what Steve Goldstein said on the show last week, who wrote a book and is a political operative, that people are over him and they want it to stop. They want to change the channel. And the problem
I think over him is too mild. It's not about being over him. It's The
problem with the polling that you will see, all polling is based on who voted in the last election.
Right.
And if you listen to some of these pollsters, they say, everybody in Michigan hangs up on us. So it's tough.
I hang up on pollsters. I don't talk to pollsters anymore.
I'll talk to a political pollster.
I'm so sick of spam calls that they have just wrung the energy out of me, and I can't even bear to talk to a pollster.
I also love what happened in Sioux City, Iowa. The anti-LGBT conservatives there who objected to the Pride March and the fact that nobody on the city council stood up to them, they were all vanquished in their attempt to unseat these people. That's great. And we could go on.
We can talk positive, negative, take your pick, and you can get it all day long on the news channels, but this is just another little ray of hope.
I'm feeling good. So
I'm feeling good about the Washington Nationals pitcher, Sean Doolittle.
Yes.
Excuse me if he's not a pitcher.
He's a relief pitcher.
Okay, thank you.
He boycotted the White House ceremony. Only a few people
there he is with his doggy.
From the Nationals. And why didn't he want to go with Trump? Because his wife was raised by 2 moms. That's one of the major reasons. But also, they together help Syrian refugees, military veterans, support LGBT rights. And the thing about his wife, Erin Dolan, when they had the first Pride thing for the Oakland A's, where her moms are fans, there were objections from season ticket holders, Pride night. She said, I'll buy your seats. and I'm going to buy 900 seats for gay groups that they can give out to whoever they want. And her husband matched her dollar for dollar. These people are just terrific. They restore my faith in humanity.
Yep.
And then she tweeted, anyone who still is upset about what we did on Monday can kick rocks, she said. She's tough.
So that's the good news. Now, part two, the not so good news.
Well, it's a continuation of everything that we've been dealing with this administration. Any opportunity they have to roll back an Obama initiative, they do. So Obama protected us in HHS grants, Health and Human Services grants and things like that.
Across the board in the government, non-discrimination guidelines were put into government programs.
So they are unilaterally eliminating these protections for us. And this includes HIV and STI prevention programs, public health, research, professional training, youth programming, anti-trafficking programs, elder services, homeless services. No more protections for us.
So
they say if you're not covered by federal law,
yes,
you're not covered.
Well, that is the rubric that has been used in several southern states, maybe others.
How's he going to end AIDS in 10 years if he puts this into effect?
He doesn't care about that because he won't be in office in 10 years. With any luck, he won't be in office in 10 months or 10 weeks.
At his Nuremberg rallies that he holds around the country, he throws in that we're going to end AIDS.
Well, of course, he'll throw in anything. But this thing about if you're not protected in federal law, we don't have to protect you. And this is the whole rationale for the Equality Act. We must, or Supreme Court decisions, although we're certainly not holding our breath for that. But this happens in the states, too, where the right-wing governments say, well, I'm sorry, but state law does not have a protection against anti-LGBT discrimination. So we're not going to let this local city do it. We're not going to...
Well, that's something else when they preempt local cities.
I'm just saying, whatever level it's at and in whatever form, this is their excuse. Rather than saying, oh, we need to protect people, we need to pass a law if there isn't one there, they say, sorry, there's no specific law, so we're not going to do it, and we're going to cut all these guidelines that the Obama administration issued.
The Catholic bishops are very happy about it, however. They praise the decision. They want government, but here's the thing. They want to keep receiving government money and yet be able to discriminate. They're allowed to discriminate in their religion if they want, basically. But if you want to get government money to provide public services, you're supposed to serve everybody.
No, but Tony Perkins et al. Are saying this is about freedom of religion, and this isn't about discriminating against anyone. These people can go get adoption services elsewhere.
Yeah.
No, it's about public money going to organizations that discriminate.
And we certainly got a signal from Justices Alito and Kavanaugh this past week. We have a picture of them. They had a meeting, and they had their pictures taken with Brian Brown. He's over there on the far right, as he is, the head of the anti-LGBT National Organization for Marriage, a cause he's exporting internationally. Also on hand was Catholic Cardinal Gerhard Müller of Germany, who blames the Catholic sex abuse crisis on homosexuality and says blessing gay couples would be an atrocity. So
picture again, please. Let's leave these pictures up longer. That is Alito on the far left beside Mueller, and Kavanaugh on the other side of Mueller. And that's Countess Thurn and Taxis or whatever.
I didn't get into it.
There as the only woman. Plus which, the World Congress of Families, which is Brian Brown affiliated, is holding one of their big meetings in Ghana at the moment, and that is trying to spread all this hatred and discrimination around the world.
Now, I'm sure I jumped the order here, but can we put Paula White up? This is Trump's spiritual advisor. Now, he's been using her for a long time, but now she's being paid for to work in the White House with your tax dollars.
I was amazed at the length of their relationship, like 15 years.
She says when she walks on White House grounds that her God walks on White House grounds. She said to say no to President Trump would be to say no to her God.
Oh, my God.
She speaks in tongues. She's a huckster. I saw a tape of her asking for, you got $100,000, you have to send that $100,000 to me. I mean,
well, she is very controversial because she promotes this prosperity gospel idea that God wants you to be very rich. Well, except that her first person she wants to be very rich clearly is herself. But there's this great split among these evangelicals, among those who believe in this prosperity gospel and are really in it for the personal money, and the others who think that's a little trashy. But they're all being brought together by Trump.
She has a lot in common with Trump. She's also on her third marriage. They're all, I'm sure, blessed. Her job, though, in the White House is to create a larger role in government programs for religious groups.
Well, the person who's really getting screwed in the midst of all this is Mike Pompeo, because he's very much part of this whole evangelical approach in the team. But because he's been so dragged into the mess of the Ukraine stuff, he is really being targeted as a hypocrite and a horrible person, which couldn't make me happier. But the other horrifying thing I read about Trump and the religious right was in the New York Times Sunday magazine this last weekend.
Yes.
A big profile of this evangelical leader, Ralph Drollinger, who, it turns out, at the behest of Pompeo and the Trump administration, is traveling the world, meeting with dictators, and semi-negotiating with them their relationship with Trump. He goes and says to them, I want you to set up Bible study groups, and they say, we want you to get us into meetings in the White House. And it's a
Daniel Ortega was one of them.
Yes, it
concentrated. Who's become quite the monster.
Nicaragua.
Well, I mean, originally he was, he was with the...
Sandinistas?
The
anti-Sandinistas, whatever. But,
yes, the Sandinistas.
Yes, but...
it's a long time ago, 86.
Well, a lot of these dictators in Central America are nothing but murderous thugs who are killing major parts of their populations, and particularly us, and particularly trans people, and now in collaboration with these evangelicals affiliated with the Trump administration.
And the president,
I highly recommend this article if you want to be really scared.
And the president, as you know, is a credibly accused multiple racist, and E. Jean Carroll, who says she was sexually assaulted by him in 1995, is suing him for defamation because he says, I never met her. I don't know who the hell she is.
Did you say racist or rapist?
Rapist. Actually, either one would do.
Yes.
The White House press secretary called Ms. Carroll trash, and there are now 2 suits in New York from women who he assaulted.
And another story that Vice President Pence is funneling money to Christian groups in Iraq. And people in Iraq working for us, for the U.S. government, say this is probably unconstitutional and is creating a very dangerous situation in Iraq. And a woman there who works for the U.S. government was fired when she objected to this.
Well, the government that we've installed there in Iraq is under siege because it's so unresponsive to the people who would like a unified country at this point. And forget the Shia and the Shiite and forget the Christians and the Kurds. They just want one nation. And they're having a revolution there right now.
And in this week's installment of What Horrible Person Has Donald Trump Nominated to the Federal Court, we have Lawrence Van Dyke nominated to the Ninth Circuit on the West Coast. The American Bar Association labeled him unqualified, calling him arrogant, lazy, ignorant of procedure, anti-LGBT. He,
when confronted with this evidence, he broke down in tears. He couldn't stop crying. And
then he claimed,
must have hit a nerve.
Then he claimed, no, I have helped gay people. What did he do?
He joined with the
Alliance Defending Freedom and an anti-gay gay group to support Christian college groups that wanted to exclude gay people.
Yes, and Lindsey Graham, cleverly, paired him with the gay nominee, Patrick Bumate, also for the Ninth Circuit. But, you know, this guy, Van Dyke, worked with Alliance Defending Freedom, which is an anti-LGBT hate group.
Oh, my God.
And, you know, you're still voting for these people, Susan Collins and Mitt Romney, who used to, when he was governor of Massachusetts, who was mildly pro-gay. All right.
Okay.
Well, you know, then the follow-up to the whole, well, we should talk about the presidential race a little bit because, you know, this is the week
Why?
Well, because this is the week that, you know, Buttigieg sort of got up into the top 4 in Iowa. And
yeah, but it's a very low top 4 for him. He's at like 9 or 10%, whereas the rest of them are in the high teens or low 20s.
No, look, we all endured a lot of emails this week about Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, who was asked, you know, are elderly black voters there anti-gay? He said, yeah, you know, but my son works for Buttigieg. So, and then there's a whole controversy over this and just debate about this. Is this really true? You know.
Well, the only reason
Kamala Harris said, look, the black vote isn't monolithic. Stop acting like it is.
She would know. But the fact is that much as we're all sick of all of this, and God knows I am, the voting is starting in Iowa in about 3 months, and that's going to pass very quickly.
Any more thoughts on Katie Hill? She gave her big speech on the floor. First of all, she voted for the impeachment resolution where they're going to have the inquiry, and the formal one. And but she gave a speech basically, you know, saying there's a double standard here for women. She talked about the sexual predator in chief, but she did resign, and because she wanted to spare her constituents the investigation into her.
Well,
and she's hired revenge porn lawyer Carrie Goldberg, who's going to go after everybody for who released the nude pictures.
I think she wanted to spare the country the distraction of her case in the midst of the impeachment inquiry.
Well, she said she's scared after what happened to her.
Absolutely. And I think she's actually gotten an astonishing amount of support and respect for the way she's spoken, for maintaining her dignity, for not lying.
But she's gone.
But she is gone, and that's a shame. And I'd like to think she could come back in some form at some time. But I think she did a really honorable thing in stepping away, not because she'd done anything wrong necessarily, although we don't know all the details, but because she looked at the bigger picture. And she said, if I stay, this is just going to be another weapon for the Republicans to use against the Democrats, and I am not going to be part of that.
Duncan Hunter didn't resign.
But that's the point. The Republicans do that, and they're, with any luck, they'll pay the price eventually.
All right.
And look, Ralph Northam didn't resign as governor of Virginia when the pictures of him in blackface came out. Now, there is a similar...
Not to mention the lieutenant governor.
Yes, there is a similar story going on in Minnesota where the out-gay state senator Scott Dibble was threatened with revenge porn by a guy he was briefly involved with. The guy wanted to continue the relationship, which had happened mostly online, and when Dibble refused, Dibble is married, by the way, the guy who is abroad started sending pictures. But Scott Dibble is standing up to this, came clean about it, didn't let the guy blackmail him behind the scenes, and so far, so good for him.
Okay, can we do some state news? We got a decision from the Kentucky Supreme Court this week about the Pride T-shirts. They didn't want to do them because they said they're Christians. The court said, well, you were sued by a group, and you have to be sued by an individual. I think that's kind of ridiculous, but that's the way they handled the case. They said the group that sued didn't have standing to sue. So, you know, a lower court had said, no, the Christians have a First Amendment right not to make Pride T-shirts.
Before we go further, I want to actually deal with the case of Charles Rines in South Dakota. This is a guy we've told you about several times before. He was convicted of murder in a case that, you know, he didn't set out to murder someone. It was sort of a situational, accidental, whatever. But when he went to trial and was convicted, The jury, it turns out, had long discussions about whether to give him life in prison or the death penalty. And there was a lot of talk in the jury room, we have since found out, about how they didn't want to just give him life in prison because he
You'd be sending him where he wants to go with a bunch of men in a prison.
He's gay, and they thought, in their own stereotypical way, oh, that'll be too nice for him. That's a reward, not a punishment. So we're going to kill him. We're going to give him the death penalty. So he has been going to court for months, years, trying to get this evidence of what happened in the jury room before a court so he could appeal this death penalty verdict. And courts have refused to listen to him. And it finally went to the Supreme Court this week, and they refused to listen to him or order a lower court to listen to him. And so this week, Charles Rines was executed.
Terrible.
Horrible.
Terrible. Well, someone who did listen was that human rights commissioner we told you about in Virginia Beach last week. He hadn't been on the commission long, LaKendrick Coburn L. He called homosexuality an abomination. He's called trans people worse. So he resigned under pressure from the mayor and the city council. But he doesn't regret anything that he said. He'd been, he had been a mentor, and that's why he came to public attention. I hate to think of what he was teaching. He belongs to a Moorish sect that rejects race identity as a path to equality and says people who identify as black or white are mentally ill. And he had voted to endorse a ban on conversion therapy, though.
Well, okay.
Next.
Yes, next.
Well, we got some violent stuff to talk about.
Well, in Orlando, Florida, they approved a design for the Pulse Memorial and Museum to commemorate the murder of 49 people at the Pulse nightclub.
It's a whole huge complex that goes on for blocks that you'll be able to see if you go online there.
And people are advocating for, there's a community coalition against a Pulse Museum that advocated for no admission charge and no merchandise sales. I'm not sure they're going to succeed. The memorial includes a sort of memorial pool, 49 trees to commemorate those killed, and is meant to have an educational component about hate violence.
Right. All right.
So,
speaking of hate violence, in Washington, D.C., 3 gay men were attacked in front of a Logan Circle gay bar. The suspects slammed one victim's head into a glass window, causing serious injury. 2 of the men are leaders of the D.C. cheerleaders group. And then in Boston, 3 men were attacked by an anti-gay group when leaving Jacques Cabaret this weekend. Also slurs. The police are investigating. None of those victims want to be identified.
USA Hockey, a national group for amateur hockey players, including my brother, who still plays on 2 ice hockey teams, but youth, adults, disabled players, has instituted a policy of immediate suspension for anyone using racist or homophobic language.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. How about let's talk about that guy, that bi football player.
Yes.
Jack Stores. We got a picture of him there. He came out to his Pomona Pitzer College football team. And there he is. He was nervous about it, but it went well. And they show the other picture. They started wearing rainbow stickers on their helmets for National Coming Out Day in October, and they're going to wear the stickers for the rest of the season.
That's actually not the picture with the stickers.
No, the stickers on the back, but that's got rainbows on the side there.
Okay.
And by the way, Jack leads the team in tackles.
And we want to mourn the death of Walter Mercado.
Yes.
He was quite the guy.
There he is. Leave his picture up there.
Yes.
He was an astrologer and fortune teller on TV. He died in San Juan.
Legendary.
But he challenged gender norms. He was in his late 80s. He said, people want to know, is Walter straight, homosexual, metrosexual, bisexual? I don't care. Here I am. I am who I am. That's it.
He was incredibly popular for decades. He died in his late 80s, indeterminate age.
120 million people watch this show every week.
I'm sorry I missed it. Not that I believe in astrology.
He also wrote for People Espanol. He was much beloved.
Yeah, so Adios.
Including by our director, Rich, who brought him to our attention.
Thank you,
since
Rich.
we're so ignorant.
We are. We have narrow focuses. All right.
International news?
Yes, lots of it.
All right.
I'm just going to start at the top. In the Cook Islands, they are passing a new crimes bill.
This is in the South Pacific.
And they had taken out any punishment for same-sex sexual relations, sodomy, as we often hear it referred to. Well, the churches got up in arms about that, and they have forced the members of parliament to reinsert, so to speak, the sodomy ban in the crimes bill. Thank you very much.
But the new ban is worse. The old one banned indecent acts between men. Now it's gender neutral, so they're going to go after women as well.
Canceling my trip to the Cook Islands.
They also banned Rocket Man down there.
Yeah.
And they say, no, and here's what they said. Well, the law, we haven't enforced the law, and we're not going to enforce this one, but it serves as a deterrent to coming out.
Oh, please.
That's what they said.
Thank you. And better news in the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality has gotten together to challenge sodomy laws in Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, and St. Lucia. They have built this organization carefully over years.
4 years in the making.
Teams, partners, lawyers, they've put it all together, and they are making a concerted effort to challenge the structural inequality and discrimination in those islands.
Now, the leader of St. Lucia, the prime minister, said, oh, this doesn't impact tourism that we have this law, but Jamaica's ban has cost the country $11 billion a year, according to a study.
Jamaican dollars. It's $2 million a year,
All right.
U.S.
I said dollars, and we're talking about Jamaica.
$2 million U.S. dollars. Let's not
All right.
distort. In Germany, they have put together a draft law that will ban conversion therapy for minors. That's expected to pass. We'll keep you informed.
In Chile, where all the people are protesting in the streets, including us, with the other progressives, the Senate finally passed marriage equality.
Senate committee, I think.
All right. Yes, you're right.
And it's the old Michelle Bachelet proposal, former president. We'll see how far that gets. The new president does not like same-sex marriage, and there are ongoing protests in Panama over several constitutional revisions. They're having violent protests in the streets. But one of the things that's under protest is the fact that the proposed new constitution would include a ban on same-sex marriage. But the president is working to have that removed from the proposal because everyone's so angry, and because the Inter-American Court on Human Rights said you have to have marriage
President
equality.
Cortizo. 3 out lesbians were elected to the parliament in Austria. There's a picture of them. All of them share migrant backgrounds.
Yes, congratulations to them. That's very exciting.
In India, the army is pushing to make same-sex relations an offense in spite of the Supreme Court ruling that decriminalized it a year ago.
Not good news. In Australia, wait a minute. No, I've got that wrong. Where am I? Oh, in Turkmenistan, not Australia. A young doctor came out publicly. He was called in by the police. He and his family members have now disappeared. They're gone. Because he came out publicly. And in El Salvador, a trans woman, Anabi Miranda Rivas, 27 years old, brutally murdered, just grabbed on the street by guys in a truck, dragged away, and then stabbed to death. Just a random grab on the street.
Getting out of hand out there.
Yep.
And tell us about the Qantas boss who got married.
That's better news from Australia, where the CEO of Qantas Airlines on the left there, who is the highest paid CEO in Australia, Alan Joyce, married his partner of 20 years, Shane Lloyd, who's Irish. And, all the politicians, all the businessmen came. It was a huge, big deal in Sydney, blah, 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 blah.
And the other good news from Australia is that the Kmart there has introduced same-sex couples with kids to its popular family pack doll sets. Now, when you order the family play set, they don't allow discrimination and don't guarantee which set you're going to receive. It could be 2 moms, 2 dads, or a mom and a dad. And as you say, you could mix and match anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine if you kept ordering, you kept getting the same, like, 2 mom set.
Each set does have 2, you can always, each set does have 2 kids, a baby stroller, a pet, picnic basket, and food items. It's for ages 3 plus.
Of course, this is all very binary, and we should have some non-binary people in those family sets, too. In Albania, in Tirana, Albania, they are having a big lesbian European conference, and this weekend they're going to have their first ever Dyke March. All very excited there about that.
All right, another sports guy who came out was a Finnish hockey player named Jan Puhakka. Now, he came out as gay after he retired at the age of 23 in 2018, and he said he wasn't good enough to have complete security in his job and play as an out gay man. That's sad. There is no active player in the pros in the country. He now works in the fashion industry.
Well, I wonder whether he could have survived as an out gay, and I wonder whether, having come out now publicly, he will be invited back into the hockey.
Have they banned anti-LGBT slurs? Like USA Hockey?
Yes, he could come over here and play on one of my brother's teams.
And President Bolsonaro is further implicated with 2 men accused of assassinating out leftist Rio council member Marielle Franco. And he was interviewed about this in a live interview, and his voice cracked, and he swore, and he said, "Why do you want to destroy me?"
What's wrong with these right-wingers?
They're very self-pitying.
They certainly are.
Trump is extremely self-pitying.
Exactly. We haven't seen him cry yet, I don't think.
Well,
but
we will.
He has a list as long as your arm of
when that jail
complaints.
Door clangs in back of him, you'll see him
Will
cry.
he melt like the Wicked Witch of the West? We'll just pour a little water on him, and the brown sugar will just dissolve him?
We really don't like this man. What do you think about what happened?
Well, you know, when the right-wingers, when the Republicans say, you know, you're just trying to overturn the results of the election. Yeah. You're just trying to get rid of him. Well, of course we are. We hate everything he does.
Right. And
we think he's destroying the country and the world.
We're really, folks, we're on the brink here. I mean, of losing the country.
This is
forever.
This is not even just about personal animosity,
right. No.
Although I wouldn't deny there's
This is about love of country.
It certainly is. And for that, well, look, all they do is lie all day and distort stuff. But I am just offended every time they act as if we don't have the best interests of the country at heart. Right. You know, Trump gets up every day and says that we're out to destroy the country.
Well, as my friend Harry Lertzman says,
when you're pointing like this, 3 of your fingers are pointing back at you.
We're not going to be able to unsee everything that we've seen about our fellow Americans.
Well, exactly.
Now, staying in international, Ireland did something odd this week. They're going to allow babies conceived by non-anonymous donors' sperm to have both same-sex parents registered on the birth certificates, but gay males who use a surrogate are not able to automatically do this, and they have to go through an adoption process. So they have to clean up their family law there, which was written by the bishops in 1920.
Inch by inch, step by step.
All right.
But we think we're progressing, even as the sledgehammer of the right wing is trying to destroy us and everything in their path.
Right.
All right, AIDS news.
Yes.
Well, there are continuing intramural fights about Gilead, the maker of Truvada and the new Descovy. On the one hand, consumers are suing Truvada for overcharging, suing Gilead for overcharging on Truvada, for delaying the release of Descovy so they could wring every dollar out of Truvada before it went off patent and generic. But then the AIDS Healthcare Foundation in California is suing Gilead and for concealing side effects of Truvada and doing Facebook ads that promote it too much. But the activists here are mad at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation for doing that because they say they're exaggerating the side effects. So there's this whole thing going on about what side are you on and when and what, and it's a mess.
And in the meantime, nothing is being done about prescription drugs in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump talks about it, the Republicans talk about it, the Democrats talk about it, and no one does a damn thing about it. I mean, look, I'm 66 years old. I had to sign up for another, supplemental for my prescription drugs. And they wanted to double the thing, but then they offered me another plan. They said that'll cover the 2 drugs you're on. I'm taking some prostate drugs. I'm an elderly person, but my doctor says I need another drug. They don't want to give me that, even though the doctor says you need this for your condition. And they said, oh, if you want us to include that drug, your premiums will go from $18 a month to $100 a month.
Oh my God!
So it's like, but look, and I could manage probably if I need to do that, if I have to have this thing. But what about everybody else in this country who needs things?
That's a stretch for you too.
It is a stretch, but if I had to, I had to. I'm just saying.
Well, but that's the thing. That's what people are faced with. If they had to, they have to.
Medicare for all.
Drugs versus, well, this is Medicare you're talking about.
Well, it's Medicare plus a supplemental.
Yes, but that's what Medicare is these days. You have to do the drug supplemental, and if you don't, then you have to pay more down the road.
Right.
So they get you coming or going.
Right.
If we're going to do Medicare for all, which would be delightful, because it is it is cheaper than the current private system, but it's not without its faults and without its need for reform.
Give people the drugs they need, just not those opioids. Well, opioids if you need them.
Very useful for people, too.
Opioids if you need them. I know we have a viewer who does.
Yeah.
He writes about how hard it is to get sometimes if you really do need it.
Yeah.
All right.
Because they're cutting back because of all the problems with people addicted.
Okay.
Are we moving on to entertainment news?
We are.
Shall we start by talking about the sound inside?
I don't have much to say about it. We love Mary Louise Parker.
Yeah.
This is an Adam Rapp play. It got very nice notices from about 90% of the critics, but not from us.
No.
That's Will Huckman playing with her. Those are the 2 characters in the play. She's a college professor. What's it about?
He's a student of hers.
I just found it tedious and very writerly. Now, when I say that, it's like
not in a good way.
She's acting like she's writing a story as she's up there on the stage. So can you even criticize it for being writerly? But
well, that's not my objection. I just thought it was.
As theater, it didn't work.
Not for me either.
We have friends who liked it.
That's what I was going to say. I've talked to 2 other people subsequently who saw it and liked it, but that only makes me question their judgment.
What have you seen this week?
Well,
besides the sound inside.
Yeah, I have been going to screenings of documentary films that are in the Documentary NYC Festival, which I've been talking about for a couple of weeks and is finally starting. It runs November 6th through 15th. There are a dozen LGBT explicitly themed films, and there are over 300 films in the festival. You go to docnyc.net to get the schedule. I'll tell you about several things I've seen. The Capote tapes, which is the closing night film, is a lot of footage of Truman Capote and lots of interesting people talking about him and some undiscovered material. And a lot of it is about his friendships with the society women and his writing the book Answered Prayers, only 3 chapters of which got published.
Like Slim.
Yes, Slim Keith talking about him, and they talk about his friendship with Babe Paley, and it's really good. I found it very interesting. I knew most of this stuff, and I love the clip of him on the old ABC morning show with Stanley Siegel.
My God.
I love Stanley Siegel.
He used to put his guests on the put himself on the psychiatrist's couch.
Yes, he brought in his therapist weekly for sessions. He was the pre-Regis.
He had a friend of mine, Bob Carter, an out gay priest, on the show, and he had other gay people on. And he goes, "You guys, do you find me attractive?" I thought it was just so inane.
I think it's
I know you liked him.
adorable. I love Stanley
You thought
Siegel.
it was good TV.
Excellent TV, and he was more original and
Anyway,
intelligent than most.
Did they have Harper Lee, Capote's
They
good
talked
friend?
about Harper Lee, and all of that is in there, but it does focus on this book and these relationships, and there's a lot of fascinating stuff. So the Capote tapes is the closing night film. Now, there are also a couple of fashion industry related films. One about Pierre Cardin called The House of Cardin. Now, I have only the most tangential, my only interest in fashion is watching Project Runway.
Okay.
You can see I am not fashion oriented. But I found The House of Cardin quite compelling. He was a fascinating guy, and I had not known most of his story. And this talks about him in a really big picture way as a modernist and visionary. He invented, really, according to this and others have said, this whole idea of branding where you license your name to everything. And he was regarded as having going way overboard on it.
Did he have love in his life?
Yes, with men. But he also had a relationship with Jean Moreau.
Really?
Yes.
The great French film star.
Yes, and Sharon Stone.
Jules et Jim.
Sharon Stone, who is in this documentary, wearing Cardin. Lots of interesting people interviewed wearing Cardin. Naomi Campbell, Jenny Shimizu, the out lesbian model. Quite a range, but Sharon Stone says, you know, watching Jean Moreau walk across a parking lot, which they have film of, is more interesting than watching almost any other actress in a full-length movie. So
now, one of these movies you've got a clip of. You want to talk about that?
No, I don't.
That's not from here?
That is something else.
Oh, all right.
We'll get to that.
Okay,
But the other
sorry.
fashion movie is... yes, Pierre Cardin had a lover, Andre Oliver, who died of AIDS, so that's part of it too. He was actually born in Italy and came to Paris in the middle of World War II. It's a really complex, interesting story. Less complex is the Martin Margiela, in his own words, documentary, which is much more narrow and much less interesting. And it was interesting to see both of them and see one be so compelling and one so uninteresting. So I would really recommend The House of Cardin.
Unless you're a big Margiela fan.
Yeah, but even so, it's an interview with him, I think. The whole point of him is he never appears on camera. He doesn't want to be known publicly, so he's never shown his face. But how could that be true unless Martin Margiela is a pseudonym and he's really someone else? Because, you know, wouldn't he go around and sign his name on things, and wouldn't people then figure out who he was?
It's a mystery.
It's still a mystery, and not a very interesting one. All right, so we saw The Sound Inside. You wanted to talk about HBO's Daniel Sloss's ex?
I do. I'd read about him, a young comedian. We have a picture of him. He did this. It's about an hour and a half routine. He's very funny about sex, but he's amazing on the need for sex education, and not in a didactic way. And he's very admirable in his takedown of rape culture. And he has to talk about a close friend who was raped by another friend. And he's not gay himself, but he does appreciate the value of anal stimulation. And he talks about that with the men in the audience.
Well, he's Scottish, so he's very progressive.
It just was an amazing routine. Daniel Sloss, if you have HBO On Demand, you can still get it.
I hadn't planned to watch that, but perhaps I will.
We may disagree, but I liked it.
The film clip I wanted to show is from a movie that we have talked about in the last year or two called Man Made. And it's about trans men who are competitive bodybuilders. And we were surprised at how much we really enjoyed the film. And it's now coming out on video on demand on all the services. Released this week. It won a ton of festival awards, all of which I think were well-deserved. Audience awards, jury awards, Man Made. And we have the 2-minute trailer of that, so we want to try to seduce you into looking at this movie.
So often in my life, just surviving was an accomplishment. Just taking a shower, just not killing myself was an accomplishment.
making muscles in the mirror when you're 4 years old and thinking that's what you're gonna grow up to be. I mean, it's just making that 4-year-old in the mirror match.
So let's bring the lightweights on stage.
I wasn't really sure if I was going to do it until I actually walked into the doors.
You feel trapped for a long time. Real trapped. The world just opened up. Just felt free.
It's definitely going to be a showdown tonight. We got some tight bodies.
Know that all these people, they all had the same courage you had to stand up there being judged by the world and not care. I've been called every name in the book, but I am doing what I need to do to be my authentic self.
That's me. Oh my God.
I was sent to the pastor and called out in the middle of a church, dabbed some holy oil on his hand and started slapping me on the head and praying for demons to come out.
Give me a big hug. I missed you.
I miss you too, Mommy.
We're all different. We all have different stories. We all transition differently.
I wouldn't want him to not be himself because I might not be attracted to him anymore. He was my person, I thought.
How can you not be okay with your kid being happy? Dead kid or kid? Boy or girl, I don't care.
We're not monsters. We're not demons. We're humans just like everybody else. We're just a little different.
I guess there's a time in your life where you want to stop hiding and just kind of live your life and not care what people think.
Thank you, gentlemen. Y'all give them a big hand.
It's just nice to be called what I want to be called.
So it was really nice to see a movie about trans men. We don't see enough of that. And I repeat, it's well worth watching. So Man-Made, available on video on demand on whatever service you use. So I'd urge you to take a look at that.
Okay. The BBC is doing a Dracula adaptation with a bisexual vampire played by Danish actor Claes Bang. From the creators of the recent Sherlock Holmes series with Benedict Cumberbatch.
I would almost think a vampire would be hematological.
Well, yeah,
they don't discriminate in
the
terms
old
of
Dracula used to bite a lot of he bite anybody's neck.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
That's true.
The daytime Emmys have issued some new guidelines. They say that nominees may choose their gender categories. They're not going to make paternalistic decisions about where you fit.
In the primetime Emmys, Asia Kate Dillon in Billions is non-binary and chose the primetime Emmy actor category because saw that as non-gendered.
As opposed to actress.
If you are non-binary, you're still being asked to choose one or the other.
Except what the daytime Emmys are doing is with the youth categories, because they have like best young actor or actress, but they're taking those gender definitions out of it.
Well, do you want to get rid of gender categories entirely for acting?
This is the question,
It's been a question for a long time.
Obviously, they were invented because otherwise men were dominating the awards, and it was created to bring some equality to the awards, but now they're seen as too limiting.
Weren't they there from the beginning?
Well, that doesn't mean they couldn't be created.
Linda
with that
Hunt
in mind.
won for playing a man
yes,
supporting.
but she wasn't.
She won a supporting actress award.
Yes, because she is not a man.
Right.
Yeah.
But she was playing one.
Yeah.
Anyway, to be continued. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Delta Airlines had cut gay love scenes from Rocket Man and from the high school drama, the lesbian scene Booksmart. Delta got, really blasted for this, and they blamed a third party for the edits, and they said they're going to restore all the scenes.
Yeah, well, what they say is they contract with a service that edits movies for airline showing, because there are certain things that, like plane crashes in movies, that they don't want to show on airlines.
It's all run by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Probably. Or probably not.
No. Now, we are in Transgender Awareness Month, And as I said, we're taping on the Transgender Day of Remembrance. But there's going to be a ceremony gathering in Vigil in New York on November 20th for this month at 6 o'clock at the Christopher Street Pier, which is at the foot of Christopher Street there by the Hudson River, so people can come out there and gather. And because it is a gathering place for transgender folks in New York.
And I think a lot of events throughout the month that are particularly acknowledging of trans people. The month is developing more and more events every year, which is good to see.
A lot of our friends are going to be in Washington on, depends on when you're watching this, but on Friday, this Friday, all week really, pushing for the Trump impeachment. But I don't have to go down to Washington. He's coming to New York on Monday, November 11th. He wants to be in the Veterans Day Parade. I don't think he's going to be in the parade. He's going to be part of the wreath-laying ceremony that they do in Madison Square Park, where there is a Veterans Memorial there around 24th Street, 25th Street. It's going to be tough to get near, but we need to be along the route with impeach now signs.
One has to wonder, as he gets booed at the Nationals game, gets boos and cheers at the UFC fighting match, whether he is being provocative about going out in public these days and drawing those boos in an attempt to rile up his base, or whether he's oblivious or what.
We're certainly not fighting veterans. I go to a Veterans Day memorial ceremony in Chelsea at 10 a.m. every year, right in our own neighborhood. But maybe he wants to draw us into like we're attacking these people. We're not attacking these people, although Bill White, the gay guy who runs the parade, who is welcoming you to this, is a disgrace.
Yeah, has been for a long time as a Republican.
And proud of it.
Yeah. I want to mention a couple of special shows coming up in December, just to get you pointed towards that. Because the Christmas and New Year's holidays this year fall on days we would normally be taping, we're doing some jimmying with our own schedules. So we've decided to put together a couple of special shows for the end of the year. There was a wonderful documentary called Rights and Reactions that we may even have, did we run that decades ago?
We did.
Okay, well, it's time for it again.
This was by Phil Zwickler, and he came in. I didn't know him at the time, but this was the year we finally passed the gay rights bill in New York in 1986 after a 15-year struggle. New York was the first place to ever introduce a gay rights law, ever.
And one of the last to pass it.
One of the last, because New York City is very conservative. Especially when you're talking about the boroughs, and forget about Staten Island, although we did once get a vote from Staten Island.
But the movie is wonderful because it shows the whole fight in the city council. Andy is a prominent part of the movie, and you see the arguments back and forth between the Orthodox Jews, the Archdiocese, the activists, and it's a really fascinating and important movie, and much more current than you would have thought 30 years later. So we thought this would be a particularly appropriate time to pull that out and let you see that again.
Watching it again, so sad. Of course, it is more than, 30 years ago at this point. A lot of people are dead, and not just of AIDS, but a lot of people had died of AIDS.
And Phil Zwickler, sadly, who made the movie, is dead. He was a great guy. And
he died in 1991. He was also the editor of the PWA Coalition Newsline and a great activist. And he used to do this show.
Yeah?
Yeah, he was one of the panelists on the show.
Well, I look forward to showing that to you. And we're also going to do a special hour updating HIV and AIDS issues with a doctor, some people living with HIV. We're going to have a wide range of people, and
including
Bill Ballman, our associate producer.
He's going to come on. He's a long-term survivor.
He's kind enough to join us for that.
And an AIDS activist and very involved in getting drugs tested and online.
So look forward to those at the end of the year. And meanwhile, we'll be back here as usual next week, and we'll see you then.